yeah, initially I was going to spray these Death Guard green and paint them up. Kind of wash them back and then whatever, do an easy job on them. But in the stream earlier, we were talking about dry brushing and I made some recommendations. Oh boy. And somebody said, why not dry brush them up? So I think that's what I'm gonna do. Some of the undercoat is still wet. Oh, that's not too bad. So the colors I've decided on are like this. So we have Deathcore Drab, Castellan Green, Deathworld Forest, Death Guard Green, and then Ogryn Camo. So essentially I'm just gonna dry brush up through these, get them a nice dark army green kind of vibe. This first coat is basically gonna be my base coat. Hopefully, I haven't obscured any details with a big old blob of super glue. Cool. So that's the Deathcore Drab all done. Next up we have Castellan Green. So it's important to note but I haven't actually washed out my dry brush in between steps because I don't actually care if the colors blend, because I'm doing so many steps of dry brushing. It's going to make the blend between the colors even better and smoother. Something you don't really learn at regular dry brushing school. So we're looking pretty good. I'm okay with the colors, how it's come along. It's not as bright as I anticipated, but that's okay. It's actually probably better that way. So now on the weapons and stuff, I'm going to be using Balthazar Gold. I'm using this because I want to be able to do some Verdigris on the weapons. What is Verdigris, you ask? Well, you just have to stick around and see. Alright, so we're going to add some rust effects to these bad boys. So essentially, we're going to start out with Mornfang Brown. And we're going to water this down and use it like a glaze or a wash. And we're going to paint that into the areas that we want to be rusty or worn. Rusty and corroded. Then when that's dry, we're going to take Scrag Brown. I'm going to do the same thing, but less. So we're basically glazing or shading or reverse highlighting. So you're going, but you're going brighter into the recesses. Then we're going to do the same thing with Trollslayer Orange. And that's going to go into the deepest recesses. And it's going to make us a smooth, nice, rusty looking transition. We're going to take our Mornfang Brown. Give her a good old shake. You just want a couple little blobs of this. And we're going to thin it like down so much. So essentially the idea behind this is it's so very, very thin that it's just gonna build up the color into the rusty bits. Even that is not thin enough. So I'm essentially just working it into the recesses. And all around these rivets. Anywhere that water and rust would naturally accumulate, basically we're just going to put a little bit of brown. Because it's so thin, when it dries, first up it's going to dry real quick, which is good. But secondly, it's going to just not overpower. Because it's so thin, if you need to, you can always go in and do more. But we won't need to because there's two other colors, two other steps. So here around the, hopefully you get it, there's like a little door and some steps. There would definitely be some wear and tear and accumulation of rust and grime and stuff there. So now we're going to do the same thing, but with Scrag Brown. So Scrag Brown is a transition point between the Mournfang Brown and the Fireslayer Orange. You can see it's a little bit more orangey, but it's not quite a true orange yet. It's actually a really nice color. I love it. So, same thing. So we're just going to take this and just put this more into the recesses. So more around the rivets. We're basically doing this a third less than what we have for the Mournfang Brown. Okay? Because this is starting to get very strong in color. So we do need to be a little bit cautious. So now, this is the dangerous part, okay? This is the bit where it's like, whew, less is more. So I've got a blob of Trollslayer Orange, and this is the bright one. So this is where we only want a tiny, tiny, tiny bit. So we're just gonna suck up some onto the tip of our brush. And this is the one that we just want to use sparingly. We kind of don't want this to be as runny because we want to get a little bit of control, but we also want it to flow. So it's a little bit, it's probably hard to see on the palette, but I've actually got it not quite as thin as the other ones, just so when I blob it, it stays where it is. Then I can dry off my brush and just kind of like soak it up a little bit. Alright, so we're up to the verdigris step. So this is the part where we're going to put some of the oxidization on the coppery, brassy, bronzy colors. So I've got Sotek green, Temple Guard blue, and Baharoth blue. And essentially I'm going to do the same thing as I did to the rust effects with the browns and oranges, but with these three colors. So we're going to thin them down a lot. That'll do. A lot. And we're just gonna whack some super thin, maybe even thinner than that, super thin coppery oxidization colors anywhere where it should be these brassy colors that I've painted. So the bases of the Hochmeister Vitruvian Colossi have been painted Teclis blue, and now I'm just going to hit them with a bit of an overbrush of Lothern blue. So now we're going to take a little bit of Deepkin flesh, and we're going to use that same dealio as before as the Lothern blue. We're just going to hit that, but only on the kind of like biggest waves. It's looking a bit shit now, but don't worry. So now what we have is some Baharoth blue. So I'm gonna, same as the other green colors for the verdigris as well. I'm gonna take a little bit of this. Be very, very sparing with your Baharoth blue. I'm gonna thin this down so much. And we're just gonna take this and just touch it in the deepest recesses. Doesn't need to be everywhere. The part of the metal that is the most corroded, the most oxidized. So obviously you can use, what's it called? Nylak oxide to make your oxidization effects. But I find this method with using the multiple layers, exactly like we did in the rust, having the multiple layers gives it an element, a little bit more element of realism. And just like highlighting and stuff, this adds extra details. So we want to focus anywhere we can around any rivets, in any recesses. And this is going to make our colors look like old copper coins. So the bases are dry. Now what we're going to do is we're going to hit our bases with a coat of Coelia Green Shade.